in this pandemic, there's been a lot of horrific things that people have experienced, whether it has been disease in the form of COVID-19, social isolation, the loss of friends, family, and other loved ones as well. And that can take a great toll on people, especially children, if they don't have the right coping systems and support systems in place. To talk about how we can provide that support best to people that are in that situation, we are joined by Jennifer Frush. She is the Executive Director of the New Hope Center for Grief Support with us today on the MegaCast. Jennifer, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. For those that are not familiar with the New Hope Center, what is the basics of the work that your organization does to help people who are grieving in our local area?
Okay, so New Hope Center for Grief Support is a 501(c) nonprofit. We provide free grief support, whether it be an initial setting, one-on-one. We also run 15 ongoing support groups that are loss specific. In addition to that, we have workshops, seminars, and specific programming for both teens, young adults, and then a family-oriented program for the family unit that has been impacted by the death of a loved one. Our mission is to bring hope, healing, and new beginnings to those impacted by the death of a loved one. So all of our programs, services are free of charge and welcome to everybody that has been impacted by the death of a loved one.
And Jennifer, everyone processes loss of a loved one, whether it be direct family, a close friend, somebody else in their life that they held in high regard. Everyone processes that differently. So how does your organization and its programs address that, especially in a group setting, because everybody is going to experience that loss in a different way?
I think that's the golden ticket right there, is just really letting individuals know that grief is a normal reaction after loss. It is normal, it is natural, and it is necessary to process that loss. Unfortunately, grief is a universal life experience we all face. The way in which we face it is defined by the relationship to the individual that we lost. So it's unique and special. Grieving is not something that you can compare to yourself, to someone else. It is really based on your relationship you had with that individual. So just meeting with individuals, just giving them comfort and knowing they're not alone. Our organization follows a peer support model, so we really try to engage with those reaching out by finding someone within our organization with a similar loss and around the same age, so those individuals can connect and then get into programs that are both loss and age specific to help them find a support system to get them through their grief journey.
And how much more effective is that strength in numbers kind of model, that grief in a group model? Do you find that to be much more helpful for these people that are dealing with the grief, especially because you're partnering them with someone who's in a similar situation, so they can kind of bounce their grief off of each other, so to speak, and process their situation and the other person's situation and find those similarities that maybe help blanket it all out and sort out the situation for them?
Absolutely. We are creatures that need to be with others. So our process and our thought here at New Hope is giving you a space to grieve in community. This allows you to, be able to share your experience, hear others' experiences, and you take what you need from that group or that program, and that will help you during your journey. It's really been critical for our participants to have that engagement, especially during such isolating times over the last 18 months. When you're alone, especially if there's a spouse loss, the last 18 months have been very difficult, isolating, extended anxiety, fear that if they get sick, who will take care of me? And oftentimes their families, may have chosen that out of protection not to see them. So this organization has been really, conscious of that. So trying to provide opportunities for additional support. So adding more support groups to the calendar virtually, and then options to meet in person, following the guidelines set forth by the host partner we're having programs at.
We're joined by Jennifer Frush. She is the executive director for the New Hope Center for Grief Support, joining us today on the MegaCast, their organization based out of Northville. And Jennifer, do you find that the COVID-19 pandemic has made that process more difficult, or has it made it maybe made it easier to help provide those supports to people, especially because this has been such an isolating time. It continues to be such an isolating time. And while people aren't able to have that togetherness in person and that warm embrace of being right there with someone else, they can still have that connection virtually.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I can't say it made it better. It created some unique challenges for grievers. Those individuals that may have been impacted by a loss during COVID or due to COVID often did not get to be with the individual when they were hospitalized. Many of them did not have the opportunity to say goodbye. And, with the shutdown, many were not able to have an end of life celebration, which just complicates the grief. So we're really conscious of that, and we spend a lot of extra time training our facilitators on how to support those individuals, but yet welcoming and making the group feel no loss is worse off than someone else's. All loss is complicated and sad. So just really engaging with individuals to give them space to talk about that, so they don't get stuck in a grief loop.
We're joined by Jennifer Frush, the executive director of the New Hope Center for Grief Support, joining us today on the MegaCast. And going through that grief process, being that it is inherently messy and it is tough and it is challenging for anybody, it's especially that for children who are not quite as equipped because they don't have that life experience necessarily of losing people over time to be able to have that already established grief process in place. Your organization recently held a day camp called Grief is Messy with 5 to 13-year-olds to kind of help them through the situation with the help of their peers. How much more effective do you find it is for children in a grief setting to have their peers, people that are their age or around their age group, help them through the grief process in addition to or in the absence of having an adult help them through the process?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's incredibly welcoming and comforting to kids to know that they're not alone in their grief. They are not the only child that has lost a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, someone due to suicide, a special friend. So first thing we do at camp is we play an activity called Crossing the Line. And, through a series of questions, we ask campers and volunteers if they, do they like sunny days? Do they like winter? Do they like summer? What's their favorite color? And then we do a deeper dive into questions. If you lost your mom, please step forward. I want you to look right and left. And these kids are so comforted to know that other kids are also impacted by the death of their loved one, but also the volunteers that are serving with them too have experienced those type of losses. So right there, there's a connection. For the state of Michigan, 1 in 12 kids are impacted by the death of a family member inside the home. So it is a need and a conversation to have to support those kids in the future. But right now, it gives the kids that may be that one kid in the class comfort to know they're not alone. And so this gives them an opportunity to connect with others, but yet know that they're completely normal, and the process that they are going to go through is welcomed by a wonderful support system here at New Hope. One last thing for kids, it's important to realize that kids grieve based on their developmental age. So a young child will grieve that loss multiple times based on where they are at developmentally. So the better coping skills, the better conversations, the more you welcome their questions, curiosity, and bring comfort and naturalness to talking about it, they will have a more successful journey because they've developed healthy skills to help them at each developmental stage.
We're joined by Jennifer Frush. She is the Executive Director of New Hope Center for Grief Support on the MegaCast today. And Jennifer, as you're approaching these partnerships and these relationships between grieving people, whether it be children or it be adults that are seeking the New Hope Center for Grief Support's support in their grief process, what's your organization's approach to forming those partnerships? Because I would imagine for some people, when they're going through grief, when they're grieving the loss of somebody, experiencing somebody else's grief on top of that can maybe be triggering for some people, or can be adding additional emotions to the situation that maybe make the situation worse for those that are grieving themselves. So what's the organization's approach to making those partnerships so that they're productive for both people involved and not necessarily weighing one person's anxieties or one person's grief or one person's heartbreak on others?
Absolutely. So the goal is to connect with each griever and kind of get a sense of where they're at, what their comforts are, and what they would like to do. New Hope is obviously a peer support offering, a group dynamic. So whether it's an ongoing group or in programming that consists of groups, we also highly recommend, especially, with the trauma of going through a global pandemic, that these individuals consider clinical support as well. They've been through a trying experience that can be very traumatic. However, we work with each griever, and the care that we give at these programs is them space to talk if they'd like to, but they don't have to. And our trained facilitators actually do check-ins. So they are contacting and reaching out to these grievers on an individual basis to have extended conversations. If anybody was ever not comfortable or felt that this, triggered additional anxiety or complicated grief, we would definitely, have further conversation and get them connected with, clinical support. We'll be the first to say our programs and services may not fit everybody, but we, over the last 21 years, we've had a very high success rate of individuals that have been through a program saying, this program saved my life, changed my life, or gave me my life back. So with that, we just hold true that we're here to support grievers and bring them hope, healing, and new beginnings based on our prior loss and our commitment to serve the organization.
Jennifer Frush joins us today on the MegaCast. She is the Executive Director of the New Hope Center for Grief Support. So when a grieving person, a child or an adult, comes into this group setting, comes into working with your organization through their grief process, what is that process of getting them into the situation and understanding their situation so that you can best provide them with the support that they need?
Absolutely. So it initially starts with a conversation, whether they contact us or someone is reaching out on their behalf. We really wait for each individual griever to reach out to us. We understand the sensitivity, and a lot of grievers aren't ready to take the step into the grief journey, to do the grief work. So ultimately, conversations take place. And from there, we have several options that we discuss based on where they're at. So they can come in for a first steps appointment, and that's where we find an individual within the organization with a similar loss and around the same age. We also can get them immediately plugged into ongoing support groups. So, just to mention a few, we have several spouse loss groups. We have a widows group as well. We have a suicide support group, a substance abuse group, an all loss group. We have 2 Parents of Hope's group, which are for adults that have lost children. So there's comfort in knowing you are not alone in your loss, especially a loss due to suicide or substance abuse. It's very comforting because oftentimes there can be shame or an embarrassment with that type of loss and guilt. So getting them with individuals that have experienced those emotions and helping guide them through the journey can be welcoming. So we do our best to kind of feel out what their needs are. We'll make recommendations, but we always encourage, if you have questions or you're feeling it's not a good fit, let us know. We'll find additional resources. And Every call, we always make a referral to several trusted clinical sources that we work with.
And Jennifer, who is eligible to seek the services of the New Hope Center for Grief Support?
Everyone that is grieving and anyone that is grieving the death of a loved one. Simply contact us at the office at 248-348-0115. Reach out on our website at www.newhopecenter.net. And one of our staff members will get connected with you and get you plugged in to some of the ongoing program or upcoming workshops, seminars. We also provide a lot of material, so books, articles, just things to speak to some of the emotions or, caring for kids that are grieving.
And how quick is that process of initiating someone into these systems that are at play? Because especially when you're going into the loss of a close loved one, a close friend, a family member, processing that grief as soon as possible and not letting those emotions and those feelings and that loss fester can be important.
Absolutely. We find sometimes people often call too soon. They're just not ready. They'll sign up for something and then they just realize, I didn't give myself a chance to breathe since the service. However, we'll answer our call today. I mean, if you call today or reach out via email, someone will be in touch with you. We offer groups daily. So every day there are various groups going. Most of our groups that are loss specific meet, whether it be on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis. We have an upcoming 8-week workshop called From Grief to New Hope, which is an amazing program for adults. This is where the work of grief is truly done. It's 8 weeks on a Monday night. You can attend in person or virtual. And it's a great opportunity to connect with individuals impacted by the same loss and around the same age to help you walk through your grief journey. So there are programs and services happening throughout the week. As well as for our children. We can meet with the family, within a couple days of your call. And then we also have once a month a Family Friday where we invite the whole family unit in for dinner. And then we do great activities where we break out. Adults get to participate in a support group and the kids get to do grief-related activities and do deeper dive discussions and how to develop healthy coping skills. We just did a kick the crap out of grief kickball game last Friday, which was a huge success. We had 50 parents and kids participate and just talked about how those emotions of grief can be really crappy. And first and foremost, we can't use that word after that evening, but it was a great dialogue. And that, playing kickball is a healthy coping skill, exercising, to deal with some of those tough emotions, to take those burdens and make them lighter.
Well, Jennifer, we appreciate having you on. It's definitely clear that having a group that you can turn to, a group of people, just a small social circle that you can turn to in times of grief to help you process your emotions and help you deal with the loss of grief, especially if it's someone that is a shared loved one, a shared friend, a shared family member, can be so important. But also gaining the experience and the knowledge of other people who have similar experiences or different experiences in life than you do can be very helpful in a grieving situation. So we appreciate your time and thank you for joining us today to talk about this.
Thank you so much for having me.